This is Judith Lay welcoming you to Manx Radio and to the podcast of this week's edition of At Your Service.
Manx Radio!
One of the first church services I ever came to on the island was a harvest Thanksgiving. After many years of attending city churches, I'd never seen a country celebration, and even now, almost 40 years later, I can remember how amazed I was by the size and the beauty of the displays, and how deeply they spoke of the glory of God's creation. But isn't it a sign of the times that in many cases today's harvest gifts will benefit our food banks? As you'll hear when we take a look at our notice board later, we're into the season of Harvest Thanksgiving, so I thought this would be a good choice to start the programme.
Come, ye thankful people, come, raise the song of harvest home. All be safely gathered in, ere all winter storms begin. God, our Maker, doth provide for our wants to be supplied. Come to God's own temple, come, raise the song of harvest home. All the world is God's own field, fruit unto His grace to yield, wheat and tares together sown, unto joy or sorrow grown. First the blade and then the ear, then the full corn shall appear. Grant, O harvest, hope that we wholesome grain and glory be. For the Lord our God shall come, and shall take His harvest home. From His field shall purge away all that doth offend that day. Give His angels charge at last in the farther tares to cast, but the fruitful is to sow in His garner evermore. Then the church triumphant come, raise the song of harvest home. All be safely gathered in, free from sorrow, free from sin. There forever glorified, in God's garner to abide. Come 10,000 angels come, raise the glorious harvest home.
Come, ye thankful people, come, raise the song of harvest home, sung for us there by Huddersfield Choral Society. And if you would like to raise the song of harvest home, then listen out for the notice board later in the programme for details of the first of the Harvest Thanksgiving services around the island. Many churches will today take disability awareness as the theme for their main service. But what do we really mean by that? Well, for me, disability awareness isn't just about very practical things like step-free access to buildings and reserved parking bays, important as those are. For me, it's being aware of what disabled people can add to our life. And in particular, I'm thinking today of our church life, in conversation with two recent visitors from Liverpool, Rev'd Kate Jacobs and Rev'd David Halliwell, who are both ordained priests in the Anglican Church. Despite his blindness, David is the team rector in charge of 3 very different churches in the busy city centre of Liverpool. And Kate's 2 churches are in Speke, not far from John Lennon Airport. So, Kate and David, good morning and welcome. And let's turn first to you, David, to get the conversation started. Tell us a little bit about yourself, David.
I'm totally blind and have been since around the age of 10. And I am team rector for the St Luke in the City team of churches in Toxteth and Wavertree, and priest in charge of St Margaret of Antioch. Born and bred in Wigan. Don't hold that against me, anybody. And I spent a lot of time away from there, living in Cornwall and London and various places in various careers before coming to where I am now today.
Blind at the age of 10 must have been a massive adjustment.
It was a massive adjustment, but possibly later. If you are going to lose your sight, doing that as a child is easier in many ways. I've met a number of people who've gone blind later in life, and there is understandably a lot of anger, a lot of why me. And I'm not saying I haven't been through that at all, but I think as a 10-year-old child, in many ways you don't have your own life. You're looked after, and you go through life thinking that this is where you are. And I think it was only probably in my teens when puberty kicks in and things like that, possibly. I realised that I was not the same. And then you have some stark choices, I think. I did. There was a choice whether to allow life to happen or to look at this and look at life and say, okay, I need to make life happen. There was a crossroads, and there was a point where I chose to make something. There was a real period in my teens of wanting to hide away because I was different. Possibly some kind of shame attached to that. But I ended up working in television and radio. So I clearly just went, okay, this is fine.
But television and radio, first of all, I'm in awe of you, and I feel like I should be kneeling at your feet and learning from you. So what did you do?
I was always fascinated by wiring and technology and pressing buttons as a child. My uncle he was an electrician, gave me a load of those old square batteries you used to get with the little springs on top, and a load of wires and some switches and some light bulbs and some buzzers, and he would just be like, make something, just go make something out of that. I was really taken by that, and where my sight wasn't particularly good, having little light bulbs was great because you could really make something happen. I liked talking to people, and I like writing. So it was trying to bring all that together in a way that I could do something creative. And I enjoyed that for a season, and then moved on with different career and ended up here where I am in the church. But I take you back to that 10-year-old child who found himself in a room one day when my sight had actually gone, in a hospital, and not being afraid. I reflect on that a lot because I lived in London for a long time. People say to me now, do you not feel frightened? Do you getting around on the underground and things like that? I've never really felt that fear. And I think I go back to that time as a child who couldn't really articulate this sense of being loved and looked after. And I remember sitting in that room, and I didn't know the dimensions of the room. I didn't know who was in the room. I didn't think anybody was in the room. But I felt warm and I felt held. And that was God. That was God. And only later could I really think that. My mum and my grandma are strong people of faith, and took me to church, and it was boring. As a child, I was on this hard seat, and it was cold, and the best bit was when you could kneel down and cuddle up to the radiator pipe on the floor. And yet, something happened to that child that is trying to manifest itself now. And I use the word trying because every day's a new day. Every day's a learning day.
What was the point where you felt that ordained ministry was where you had to be?
So I did my work at the BBC and was having a good life in the city with the money to do that, a partner, we had the life. And there was always something more. I was always looking for the next thing, waiting, looking. Oh, this isn't all. This isn't everything. Even though superficially it was everything, materially in that sense. And I think I'd been exploring different churches. London was great for that. I going to some Pentecostal churches and other churches of different denominations, and just seeking out what it was that I felt comfortable in and with. I think there was a point when I'd moved to the north and I was doing some freelance consultancy and my contract was coming to an end. And by this point, I'd started leading and helping out with worship in churches. And I just went, okay, God, if this is going to be so, let's take a step. So I chose not to get another contract because it was a 6-month contract. And I went through the process to theological college, which was a joy. And what was growing in me mattered. And then I spent my curacy in Rainhill near St Helens and came to the end of my curacy and it was like, what next? My family is just me. And so I had an opportunity to go to anywhere. Liverpool was never a place I particularly felt called to. And I think for me, in all my life, discerning for me is listening to others and praying with others and people I trust and I love who say, have you thought about this? And challenging me. That's God, but through them. God sometimes comes to me in ways that is kind of on a one-to-one. But I love that discerning of others in the process. And here I am doing something straight out of curacy where I was like, right, God, I would like, please, a small church where people will bring me fresh cakes every day and maybe a turkey at Christmas, right? And I can be the vicar.
Instead of that, you are the team rector of 3 churches in the centre of Liverpool. The name St Luke in the city. The St Luke is the bombed out church at the top of Bowl Street that has been preserved as a war memorial. That is your parish.
So I have those 3 churches and then I have a 4th church, which is St Margaret of Antioch. And I feel so blessed by the different ministries I have. So St Luke in the city, the 2 main churches that are operating in that at the moment is St Bride's Church on Percy Street, which is a real hub for social justice. And I don't want to be part of a church that doesn't do stuff because I think that's our calling. I really believe that. So St Bride's, part of St Luke in the city, hosts really, really important work for our community. So Red Cross and work with refugees and food banks. It's also the home of Open Table, which is the LGBTQ affirming church communities that began at St Bride's and now has a network across the UK. It's really, really affirming for everyone. People are more than welcome to be part of that. But I think it comes from a time when that wasn't always the case in churches. So it's grown to be a really beautiful community in its own right. And then I walk around the corner, literally around the corner, to St Margaret's, where it's a very traditional, more Anglo-Catholic worship. So as the priest there, I use incense and I wear splendid robes. And I just love the fact that these identities sit alongside each other and work together. And I'm able and privileged to be able to dwell in both those kinds of worship. If it's authentic, it's fine. Neither of those traditions is better than the other.
I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
My guests this morning are 2 Anglican priests from Liverpool. We've already met Rev'd David Halliwell, who is blind and the team rector in charge of 3 churches, St Luke in the city. So now let's meet Rev'd Kate Jacobs, who ministers to 2 churches in Speke, not far from John Lennon Airport.
I'm going to start with where my calling came from. So as a woman, I'm 62, and I was 6 when I first felt God call me into ministry. I was a little girl, and I used to play churches. When everybody else was playing schools with their dolls and teddies, I was playing churches. And I used to put my cardigan on back to front, put a little piece of paper on over the top, so I had like a collar. I'd have a piece of bread and some Ribena. I closed the bedroom door because I had this sense that it wasn't quite, I'd never seen a woman do it. And so I had this sense that women didn't do this, but I felt very called to do it. And I would play communion with my dolls and teddies with bread and Ribena. And that was in a little village in Wales. So that's really where the germ of my journey began. It really began there.
So obviously you'd grown up in a church-going, faith-filled family.
I had, yeah. I was taken to church from being born. And throughout my life, I went to church, more or less. There was a point when I stopped going, but yeah.
So it's something that is part of your life. So where did it all change, Kate?
Well, it only changed. So I've only been ordained for 3 and a bit years now. So it was quite late coming actually into fruition, and a very big journey in between, and a journey where I felt really flung out of church. So when I was 32, I was diagnosed with HIV. And at that time, you know, the message that came out generically from the church was that AIDS was a punishment from God. And I felt very much like not my God. And I got up and left the church. But it was a time of great spiritual exploration for me. So whilst I wasn't going to church, I still felt very connected to God. And I explored sort of more metaphysical ways of connecting with the divine. I trained as a Reiki master, so I did Reiki, started doing lots of meditation, exploring lots of alternative therapy and medicine in order to underpin my good health, because at that time there wasn't medication. I was given 10 years to live, and that was 30 years ago. And my prayer when I was diagnosed was that I would have enough years to see my children grow into adults. And I'd been given 10 years. That was the kind of parameters they gave me, was 10 years at the outside. And I've been given 30. And I think that's sort of, why do we go to church? I think it's that whole idea of being part of a community and just how that can support you. And as somebody who felt really on the fringes and the edges of that, I didn't feel like it was a place for me to be. And I didn't feel like I could be there authentically, hiding a secret, as it were. So I know, I've done quite a bit of work around HIV and faith since then. And I know that the experience for a lot of HIV positive people was and still is to some extent, you can't be fully open about who you are and, the illness that you live with. So it remains a secret. People sit in the pews and it's a secret. And we don't talk about it because it's so associated with sex, basically.
But yet at the same time, the church is obsessed with sex.
Yes, exactly.
But we don't talk about it.
No.
Do you look back, Kate, and think that all of that was making you better at ministry now? All of that experience gives you a depth and an understanding as an ordained minister now.
Yeah, I think it can't help but inform the work you do. When we're ordained deacons in the Church of England, one of the remits we are given is to go into the lost and forgotten places in the world and seek out those people who are on the fringes and margins of life. And when you've lived in those places, you go there, I think, with a different sense of compassion, a different sense of understanding, a different sense of acceptance, and, dare I say, a greater love in your heart, because you've walked in those places too. So it's not lip service, it comes from lived experience, and that makes a very big difference. It may be a different lived experience, but the experience of living on the margins and the fringes has the same elements within it. And it's really powerful because actually if you look in the Gospels, it's exactly the place where Jesus ministered consistently. So it does feel like you're really, I don't know about you, David, but it does feel like you really are planted there with all that experience right in the spaces that Jesus would have been in or would be in if you walked the earth today.
So, Kate, tell me about your ministry now. You're in Speke.
Okay, so we're 2 churches. All Saints is a little church that's up by the airport. It was associated with Speke Hall. The last Lord of Speke built it for his daughter for her 21st birthday present. I'm very, very jealous of that, I have to say. So it's quite quaint and it's a very, very traditional church, quite beautiful little church. I'm also part of St Aidan's. St Aidan's was a church in the middle of the estate, which sadly got beyond repair and had to be decommissioned and demolished. So that church community moved to a cafe on Eastern Avenue. So we've got sort of churches on either side of the estate, but this one's a cafe. And from there, they run food pantry. And on a Monday, they have a toddler group there as well. On the Thursday, we have a cafe church, which starts with a meal. So a lot of the work there is centred around food and around feeding and around a table. So we start with a meal and then we have a Bible study and once a month communion. The other church is more traditional in as much that it has communion every week and it's of a low evangelical tradition. So yeah, so they're contrasted, very contrasting, but great ministry and I love it. And a bit like David, you know, because I actually came from St Bride's. That was my sending church, funnily enough. And I never had a vision of doing estate ministry, but I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I love the people. I love my work. I go to work. I never don't want to go to work. It really pulls me. It's a joy.
And you can see it's a joy. I'm looking at you now and I can see the joy. Actually, you can see the joy in both of you. So clearly you are where God has planted you, and your different experiences over those years have obviously prepared you for these ministries that you're doing now.
I think I'm really excited for Kate's ministry in the sense it is this estate ministry, so you are ministering where you are. I think something that is challenging in the context that I have is that we are often gathered communities. So people will come because of the style of worship or because of the history they have with the place. And they're not of that place necessarily. They will come to it. And I think that comes with its own set of challenges. But I think Kate's ministry is very rooted, and I like that.
I completely understand. Yeah, very, very different. Once upon a time, the city centre was thronged with housing, but a gathered community, as you say, they come for open table or for St Margaret's style of high church worship. But you, Kate, you've got the people coming round the corner to your cafe church, haven't you?
Literally, yeah. And there is something really lovely about that because it really enhances a sense of community.
We're hearing that church going is becoming more attractive to young adults, that they're wanting to put another dimension in their life. Are you seeing any sense of this?
Somewhere like St Margaret's, which has always done what it does, because it has this solid identity, it doesn't change. And in many ways, I think people are looking for a rock in the sea, in the sort of chaotic sea that is the political and social media world that we live in. And I think sometimes they might find it there. So I am optimistic, and particularly with work that's going on in Toxteth and Wavertree at the moment, with parishes working more closely together, the future's good.
For me, one of the astonishing things over the past 3 years has been the numbers of children who have asked their parents that they want to be baptised. And the children are driving that desire for baptism, which has just kind of blown me away, really. Baptism ministry is something I absolutely love. When I first was ordained, I was kind of a bit, why do we baptise babies? And surely this is something you do when you come to faith. But I'm completely of the opposite opinion now. I don't think you can have enough blessings of God, you know, to put the watermark of God onto people and to bless them. You can't do enough of that, yeah. So really through that ministry, there's been quite a lot of people coming back to church. The other thing that's been quite interesting about that is the number of children who've been baptised and their parents have said, I've never been baptised. And you're baptising parents and children together, which is just a really, really beautiful thing. And just really astonishing stories of, you know, young people asking their parents to bring them to church and then just seeing their faith grow and develop. So it is happening, definitely.
'Cause all my life you have been faithful. Oh yes you have. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh I will sing of the goodness of God. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God.
Thank you to my guests, Rev'd David Halliwell and Rev'd Kate Jacobs, Anglican priests in ministry in Liverpool. And that recording of The Goodness of God was by Caleb and Kelsey. And now let's turn our attention to a very varied notice board. Today, the 28th, is the start of the harvest celebrations at Sandygate Chapel on Derby Road in Sandygate. Their harvest Thanksgiving service will be tonight at 6:30, when Mr Bert Quayle will preach and Mr Bill Corlett will be the soloist. Then you're invited to call in to Sandygate Chapel for tea and cakes and to enjoy the harvest flowers any afternoon this week between Monday the 29th and Friday the 3rd of October, when the chapel will be open each day between 2 and 4 p.m. There's no set charge, but donations to chapel funds would be welcome. This Friday, another regular monthly lunch starts. This one is in Ballasalla. This Friday and subsequently on the first Friday of each month, come to the hall right next to the Abbey Church in Ballasalla between noon and 1:30 to enjoy homemade soup, bread, fruit and hot drinks. After lunch, you've got the option to stay on for a just-for-fun quiz or some music, play Scrabble or just to have a chat. Eat what you need and pay what you can. The anonymous brown envelope payment system will be used, and all are welcome. There's lots happening next weekend, and we begin with the monthly craft market in Glenmay Chapel and Community Centre. Open on Saturday the 4th from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. There'll be homemade produce and handicrafts by local artists and much more on sale, as well as homemade light lunches, bacon baps, hot and cold drinks and cake. And as always, admission is free. Next weekend, October the 4th and 5th, there are 2 days of harvest and heritage celebrations at Dorby. Call into Dorby Church and schoolrooms any time next Saturday or Sunday between 10:30 and 4:30. They'll be decorated throughout with harvest displays, plus local farming stories and images in the schoolroom. The Dorby Hub local history exhibition will also be open. Admission is free, with tea, coffee and traditional Manx soda cake on sale on both days. Then next Sunday evening at 6:30, you're invited to the Dorby Harvest Home concert service with the Londu Male Voice Choir to lead the singing of traditional harvest hymns. Neil Evans will talk about Harvest Past, and Katie Grace from the Manx Wildlife Trust will talk about their work to benefit farming and nature. The concert service will be followed by a Manx tea in the schoolrooms. Also next Sunday, the 5th, Begarrow Methodist Chapel, just on the main road outside Kirkmichael Village, celebrate their harvest next Sunday afternoon at 2:30. Mrs Pauline Corlett will preach and Mr Paul Costain is the soloist. There'll be refreshments and an auction of produce after the service and a warm welcome for everyone. And it's harvest time in Ballakilferrick Chapel next Sunday at 3:00. Their service will be led by Reverend Joe Smart. Also, next Sunday, the Mariners Choir will be in Ballabeg Methodist Chapel for a service starting at 6:30, and this will also be Ballabeg's Harvest Thanksgiving. Reverend Christvin Edbarg will preach, and as usual, there'll be supper to follow and community hymn singing. And another choir will be in St Mark's Church next Sunday evening at 6:30. The choir, Voces Insulai, with organist John Elliott, will sing a traditional harvest choral evensong. All your favourite harvest hymns will be included, and there are refreshments to follow in the schoolroom. And that's all that we have time for now. But I'll be back tonight at 9:00 with Sundown, your invitation to join me in our virtual lounge for late night easy listening with your requests and dedications. And I'd love you to join me if you can. And so, until whenever we meet again, this is Judith saying thank you for listening, and I wish you and those you love a blessed and peaceful week and a very good morning.
Station, Manx Radio.